I want you to jump back with me to the 2018 season. It's early December. The second-year head coach of the Los Angeles Rams, Sean McVay, is everybody's favorite wonderkind. His offense has resuscitated forsaken first overall pick Jared Goff. It's placed Todd Gurley at the forefront of the MVP race. Frankly, it hasn't been stopped yet. The Rams are 11-1 and have scored an average of over 38 points in each of their last 4 games. Their sole loss, a 45-35 race against the New Orleans Saints. On Sunday Night Football, they're going to score 6 points. Jared Goff will throw 4 interceptions. Gurley will carry the ball 11 times for only 28 yards. Bears defensive coordinator Vic Fangio will stand on the opposing sideline and cackle maniacally as thunder and lightning clash behind him. Sorry, stick with me. I'm just trying to set the scene. That game will live with Sean McVay for a long time. It's the first game in which his offense has been completely and thoroughly dunked on. Over 2 years later, when looking for a new defensive coordinator, he'll call on a totally unknown young coach, a guy who was only in his second year of NFL coaching when he stood behind Fangio on that ominous sideline in 2018, Brandon Staley. You know the rest of the story. The Rams defense dominates the league in 2020. Staley gets the same wonderkind treatment McVay got, and the Chargers hire him away to be their head coach for 2021. And now the same thing that happened with McVay's offense, the proliferation across the league, the poaching of assistant coaches, that's now happening with Staley's defense.
Is anybody surprised about what just happened? No.
Staley's influence on modern NFL defense is impossible to ignore. But what exactly is Staley doing on defense? And why has it been so successful, not just against McVay's offense that one fateful night, but against pretty much every offense it's faced? This is how that Week 14 game in 2018 changed the future of NFL defenses. Welcome to X's and Shows. I'm Ben Solak, and over the course of this 3-part miniseries, we're going to be talking about how NFL defenses are fighting back. This is part 1, the Brandon Staley shift. Let's take a look at how we got here. The answer starts with a box, the tackle box to be precise. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a box drawn on the defensive side of the field with its edges outside of the tackles on the offensive line. Defensive coordinators use their box count, the count of total players they have in the tackle box, as a measure of their ability to defend the run. Let's take a basic 2x2 set with 5 offensive linemen and a running back. If the offense is running the football out of this look, the only people that can block are these 5 offensive linemen. If the defense wants to stop the run, then they need 6 bodies in the box, 5 bodies to take on the 5 offensive linemen, and a final free body to tackle the running back. We call this being +1 in the box, because the defense has 1 more body in the running game than the offense does. We might also call it being gap sound, having a player for each gap. If the offense adds another potential blocker, say by subbing out a wide receiver for a tight end, the defense will usually bring another body into the box to maintain that +1. But nothing is free in the NFL. Everything comes with a cost. To put those extra bodies in the box, defenses have to sacrifice bodies elsewhere. In the run-pass dichotomy of defenses, adding bodies to defend the run comes at the cost of defending the pass. By staying +1 in the box, the defense is often stuck with 1 safety deep, a single high safety. And from these pre-snap looks, defenses are generally playing cover 1, man coverage with a deep middle of the field safety, or cover 3, zone coverage with a deep middle of the field safety. Helping outside corners against top receivers from these looks can be really, really tough. Now, most NFL defenses want to live with +1 in the box, especially on early downs we would typically call running downs. The problem is that in the modern NFL, those running downs are increasingly becoming passing downs, or even worse, play-action passing downs. With the Rams, Staley decided to make the philosophical switch, turning the defensive meta on its head. He was going to line up without the extra man in the box. He was going to move that player to the defensive backfield, adding another body to the secondary. He was going to stop the pass at the expense of stopping the run. In general, we call these structures 2 high shells, 2 high safeties. And from these shells, you can run a much greater variety of coverages and match a much wider variety of routes, all because of that extra player you've added to the defensive backfield. Philosophically, Staley talks about putting a roof on top of the offense. There might be running lanes that open up. There might even be short completions that are relinquished. But with 2 deep safeties and that extra defensive back on the field, intermediate and downfield routes will be smothered, and explosive passes won't be surrendered. In 2020, only the Ravens defense surrendered a lower explosive pass play rate than the Rams. This is the major philosophical change. If NFL offenses want to throw it, and particularly they want to throw it far,
how much you want to make a bet I can throw a football over the mountains?
Then Staley's defense lines up to stop them from throwing it, and particularly to stop them from throwing it far. Everything that trickles down from this is technique and scheme. In certain matchups, star cornerback Jalen Ramsey would bump into the slot instead of playing outside, and that gave Staley a dominant, physical player to attack those quick outside runs, bubble screens, and RPOs that offenses were trying to use to attack the weaknesses of his defense. The Rams lined up in those two high shells with those two deep safeties, but they could spin or rotate those safeties post-snap and suddenly shift to cover 1 or cover 3, which forces quarterbacks to read and react on the fly. But perhaps the biggest change in scheme came not in the defensive backfield, but on the defensive front. That's where Staley took that foundation that Fangio had laid and, with the Rams, built upon it. Remember, these two high defenses of Vic Fangio and Brandon Staley, they're no longer +1 in the box. So somehow they have to find a way to account for multiple gaps in the running game with a limited number of players. Staley's answer for that came from the college level. When those gap-sound defenses line up, they put a defensive lineman in each gap. That lets the defensive lineman play as penetrators, shooting upfield and disrupting the backfield. That's how a 275-pound defensive tackle like Michael Bennett was so disruptive for the Legion of Boom Seahawks in the early 2010s. He was a quick, slippery player who could knife between offensive linemen, create havoc. Running backs might try to cut upfield into an unoccupied gap, but that's where the linebackers would be waiting, ready to plug the hole. Because he had two deep safeties, Staley couldn't line up his defense like this. There weren't enough numbers to make the math work. So he borrowed a common college front, often called the tight front or the mint front. Instead of putting 4 down defensive linemen in 4 gaps, he put 1 defensive lineman head up on the center. For the 2020 Rams, that nose tackle was Sebastian Joseph Day. And that nose tackle would be responsible for both A-gaps, the gaps between the guard and the center. He might occupy one gap with his body, fooling the running back into thinking the other A-gap was open, but when the back went to cut back, Joseph Day could push across the center and condense the space, clogging the lane and preventing the running back from getting upfield. In Staley jargon, Joseph Day is playing a gap and a half. The other down defensive linemen like Aaron Donald and Michael Brockers could do the same thing. In the tight front, they'd line up on the inside shoulders of the offensive tackles or even head up, playing predominantly in the B gap, but they're able to work back into the C gap if the ball takes them there. The goal for these defensive linemen wasn't necessarily to penetrate upfield and disrupt the offense, but rather to control a gap and force the running back to read, think, and react. And the extra time that those traffic jams created gave Staley's 2 deep safeties enough time to diagnose the run, get downfield, and add themselves to the box. All of a sudden, even without lining up in a gap-sound formation or having that extra defender in the box, Staley's run defense had enough bodies to limit big gains. Now, adopting Staley's philosophy, that's easy. Executing that philosophy with scheme and technique is much harder. The 2021 Rams, now coordinated by Raheem Morris, are trying to replicate Staley's defensive approach, but with far less success. Through the first 13 weeks of the season, they've surrendered a success rate of 44.7%, which is just around league average. Jalen Ramsey has played almost as many snaps in the slot as he has out wide, as the Rams try to account for the losses of Troy Hill and John Johnson III, star defensive backs lost in free agency this past season. In Green Bay, defensive coordinator Joe Barry, the Rams' outside linebackers coach under Staley in 2020, is adhering to Staley's 2 high philosophies, and his defense is allowing a success rate of 47.3%. That's 7th worst in the league. Even with the Chargers, Staley himself is struggling to find the same success as he did with the Rams. The Chargers are 9th worst in total success rate allowed. Their light boxes are allowing the worst success rate on rushing downs at 48.4%. Even the 2020 Rams, for all of their success, were kicked from the playoffs by a 36-carry, 188-yard rushing performance by the Green Bay Packers in the divisional round of the playoffs. Staley built a defense that challenged the running game, not the passing game, to beat him, and the Packers were able to deliver. But why is the 2020 Rams model so difficult to adopt? Well, for one, 31 NFL teams don't have Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald on the same field at the same time. But philosophically, from a much larger view, changing the way an entire unit plays defense is difficult to accomplish overnight. The X's and O's might be sound on the chalkboard, but NFL players have habits they've ingrained over years of high-caliber play. And those habits can be tough to unlearn when the X's and O's need to be executed on the field. And that's the underappreciated character of Brandon Staley's genius, the other side to his fast-rising coin. Yes, Staley is a great football mind who has blended ideas from the college and professional ranks to generate a viable response to the league's modern offenses, but he's also just a great teacher. Players rave about his ability to communicate and connect, helping him put 11 players on the field who are acting in concert.
Hold up, we got one more. This one's for you.
Staley doesn't just know what the picture should look like, he also knows how to bring the picture to life. The brush sizes and hues and tinctures. As his scheme spreads, as the techniques become more well known and the players leave in free agency and carry their wisdom with them, other coordinators will have an easier time copying his model. But even after that fateful Chicago night, it took a couple of years for Staley to get his opportunity with McVay. And it'll take him another couple years still to get his defense off the ground in Los Angeles. Switches don't just get flipped in the NFL. Evolution is an arduous process. But that means we get to watch that evolution blossom right before our eyes.